All right, we are back in action.
We are back.
Oh, who's that voice? Who's
Guy.
that? Hey, everybody, we are back. Jake's back. I'm back. I know there's been a little bit of a hiatus with just me doing a couple episodes here and there. Jake was out doing secret squirrely stuff.
Yeah,
And
not New York State secret squirrels, because those get assassinated. But
apparently,
I had to go be an adult for a little while and make some paychecks. So
yeah.
super missed it and missed your face there, bearded wonder. I like it in
I'm
gray.
all bearded now. It's gray. It's showing my age and everything now.
It's showing your wisdom, sir.
That's true. My son has a stash growing, and I asked him, when are you going to shave it? He's like, Dad, it is a sign of maturity to have a mustache. I said, wow. I said, I got no argument with you, buddy. That's you stumped me on that one. What 12-year-old says that?
Your 12-year-old.
My 12-year-old.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no, it's been a minute, and I blinked, and all of a sudden August was gone, September was gone, October's gone, we're into November. You've had some interesting side quests, for lack of a better term.
Let me back up. I forgot to hit record on the podcast machine.
Oh, well, we've been recording on this.
It's okay. So let me do this. All right, we'll start again, and I'll edit it. Here we go. All right. Anyway, so let's try this again. All right, everybody, we are back, and when I say
actually recording this time,
actually recording, and when I know, well, we just spent what felt like an hour recording and not realizing we weren't even recording.
So basically, nothing's changed during our hiatus.
Yeah, no. So as you guys didn't hear this part, but in the now that I'm the bearded wonder, with the wisdom that is not there clearly since I did not start recording.
Push big red button. Okay,
yeah, I'm like,
first?
Wait a minute. This button is green still. It should be red. Oh, that's right. I didn't record.
Yeah, it's backwards. I know. Green means go, right?
I know.
That's always been a thing. But no, super stoked to be back. Man, I can't believe it's been almost 2 months since we got to sit down. I think Laura was the last person you and I got to sit down with, and then I had to go be an adult and work. Yeah, and you had to go be an adult and do non-work side quests.
Yeah, exactly.
For lack of a better term, but yeah. If you want to, I mean, none of my stuff's all that exciting. Your story's kind of shitty, though.
Literally. I see what you did there.
Somewhere Gabe's laughing.
Yeah, exactly. Not my son. Oh, my son Gabe would probably laugh.
He would probably laugh too.
He would laugh at me.
Yeah.
But no. So part of the reason I've been sort of in and out, just episodes here and there. I've been going through some medical stuff for the past 8 freaking months. I've had some weird lumps growing in my colon area, so legit, it's been shitty. And
I've been waiting for that joke.
Yeah, it's been actually. So today, funny story. My dispatcher, one of our dispatchers, I was working, and he said something to the effect of, "Well, Sarge, your ass is wide open now." I'm like, "Yep, might as well."
I love dispatchers, especially when it's quiet and it's like, let's just send this one, see how it lands.
Pretty much. It was like a full send from him. So I'm like, yep, got it. But yeah, so on a more serious note, so, just one thing I'd advise anybody, especially as we getting into these ages of toxic exposures and whatever bullshit we're being exposed to, man, early intervention is the best intervention, I guess, especially with these types of weird anomalies that just pop out of nowhere. It's been quite the experience. You're talking, I've had it all from misdiagnosis to fucking just frustration to everything. So it's been a little bit of a project.
Well, and we talked about this offline a number of times. Like, you have to be your most important self-advocate with doctors, because the guy that got C in medical school is also called doctor. They're not always right.
Yes,
and 100%. It's a numbers game. Like with you, the without putting anybody on blast, the general practitioners, they evaluate whatever, say 100 people a day, make it up a number. They're going to treat it like a numbers game where if 92% of their diagnoses are accurate, That's
Yep.
great, right?
Yep.
Even though we know it's lower than that. But
Yep.
the other 8% are real, like real people. And so when they're burning through patient files, trying to just, turn and burn numbers to clear the deck, stuff
Yeah.
gets missed, or
Yeah.
they just don't look hard enough to see the other things. And to get into a specialist with all the hoops you have to jump through and that you've had to jump through, it's almost like you have to not get better long enough to really get
Yeah.
the problem solved. The
Yeah.
problem with that is, like with what you guys have been exposed to, everybody that we know that served in active combat in the Middle East, we're all convinced that it's something in the water, literally in
Mhm.
the atmosphere and in the
Mhm.
soil, that is leaching these toxins, because the rate of GI and intestinal and colon cancer and stomach cancer amongst our generation of guys that deployed is astronomically out of control.
It
And they don't
is.
have an
Yep.
answer for it, other
No,
than
and that's
you
the
all were in the same
frustrating
kind of
part.
sandbox.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating part. And I've always researched this kind of stuff since it's been brought to more light, and everything is just up in the air pretty much. Like, and the biggest killer, I think, is just you know the treating of the symptom rather than the root cause, right? That and because that's what I dealt with, right? They were treating the symptom, but not really. Especially like you said, with general practitioners, different. They treat the symptom, not the actual root cause. Where I finally got to a doctor who was like, "Well, no, we need to get to the root cause as why this is
Yeah.
happening." So, which I'm glad I finally got someone that actually wants to investigate
Yeah.
further.
Well, and he knows too. The biggest problem with you, me, our kind of guys and gals is that we're all stubborn assholes. And
We are.
so the first symptom is discomfort. We're ignoring it and going on with our day. It's kind of like, whatever, right? But if it's not normal, it's not normal. You need to take that as a data point. And if you're out there, listen to this and it's like, oh, I've had this kind of nagging thing like this, but it's
Go
fine because
get
I can work around it.
checked.
Go get checked. Even
Yeah.
if it turns out to be a nothing burger,
Yeah.
fine, great. Now you've got a baseline for what nothing looks like. So then when there is a
Exactly.
real situation, you're going to have something to compare against. And that goes from your hormone profiles to your overall blood panel to your GI, your gut, bladder. Like if you're having trouble with that whole side, a couple of the guys we know in New York that, have like weird bladder cancers, like,
Yep.
it wasn't like they couldn't pee. It was just that it was coming out differently and different flow rates. And it's like, yeah, dude, if it's not normal, it's abnormal. So
Yeah,
go
exactly.
get checked. It doesn't,
But like you said though, the most stubborn fucking people in the world are just our generation,
yeah,
our veterans,
our
cops, or whatever.
background
We're just
people.
our
Yeah,
background people. Just we are very stubborn, but it gets to a point where the stubbornness is going to kill us. So I mean,
absolutely.
it's a good thing. I finally, 8 months ago, I went to the went to the doctor to get checked, and I started that whole thing. But then with the misdiagnosis, and then the actual some of the testing that they did not do that they were supposed to do that they
Yeah,
never told me I was supposed to
right.
do. I'm like, so that frustrated me even further. So this last like go around, I went, this one fucking lump was so fucking painful. I could barely get out of bed. I was literally going septic from what I
Yeah,
learned from the docs,
yeah.
where it's a good thing. Like right when they saw me and they did the CAT scans, all that, they're like, oh, we need to like operate now.
Oh
I'm like,
yeah.
What?
You would
Like,
have
you never want
stubborned
to
your
hear
way.
that.
Yeah. I mean, if you were septic, there might not be recovery from that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And it's kind of one of those, like, especially with sepsis, you tend to know that it's over and there's nothing you can do about it before it's over, which
yeah,
is like, just to think that you could have been a little bit more aggressive in your advocacy for yourself. I'm always like, hey, go pick a fight with the doctor. Push them to their limit, to where they're having to answer questions that they aren't comfortable with, because that is how you're going to get to the bottom of what's going on. And if it is a nothing burger, great. But
yep,
if it's
exactly.
not, the best time to find out a problem with yourself medically was yesterday.
Yeah,
The next
yeah,
best is right
exactly,
now, right? You don't
exactly.
have time. You just don't have
No,
time to waste.
No, no. So that's what's been, we give you a quick Cliff Notes version of what's been going on. So now that hopefully, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna get the test that I'm supposed to be getting, which I'm gonna keep pushing for them and all that. Hopefully, we'll get an answer as to what's going on. And like you said, it might be one big. Hopefully, I'm hoping for the one big nothing, and versus the worst case scenario. So, but was it hope for the best, plan for the worst, hope for the best type of
Exactly.
thing.
Yeah. Yep. And that's good. It's actually kind of a funny like parlay into what we were going to talk about today with your article on police recruiting, because without giving away the ending, people are afraid to look for the tough guy, right? Or to become the tough guy. And I mean, yeah, you growing up and getting out of Lebanon, I mean, that's a whole, we know that like is a whole different environment to be a child in, and it breeds toughness. But there's plenty of guys that grew up here that
Oh
we're
yeah.
friends with that are just as stubborn and stupid after
Yep.
four, right? So it's a
Yep.
learned ability. And I really did like your article, the one that you just put up a couple weeks ago about like how to transform police selection. And I think it comes down to that. We need to find more younger guys that want to end up stubborn like us,
Yeah, yeah.
but let's do our best to coach them to not end up,
Well, that's
having
the
some of
thing.
the issues that we have.
I'd rather work with a go-getter
Yeah,
who needs to be reined in a
a
little
hard
and taught
charger. Yep.
versus a fucking slouch who I need to kick in the ass just to see if he or she's still alive.
Yeah,
So
and that's again, it's a good way to take and just pivot right into what people hear and see out of you is 40 plus years of this type of lifestyle
yeah, yeah,
with, now you've got some trauma. And any doctor, whether they're good or bad, will tell you the second somebody gives up fighting, they don't have much left,
no,
right?
they don't,
The
they don't.
people that end up making it through big things like cancer, lymphoma, the various different exposures, it's because they have that resolve to fight to the bitter end. And
Oh
that,
yeah.
I think, is a big piece of what you talked about in your article.
Yeah, so we'll just get right into. So this article, obviously Havoc Journal. Once again, I always thank them for publishing all my work, and the title is "We Must Fundamentally Transform Police Selection." So we will obviously put the article in the show notes so you guys can read it, and this will be posted on YouTube also, this episode, so you guys go check it out. So one thing that we've noticed, I mean, I'm sure Jake, you can attest to this, just the decline of qualified candidates to become police officers, and it's been like that for the past, I don't know, what do you think, Jake? Like 10 years, maybe
I,
a little less.
I feel like, and I hate to just make this the linchpin of all things, I think the fulcrum of change really hit its maximum peak with George Floyd. But I mean,
Yeah,
we had Freddie Gray before that, Baltimore,
Michael
Ferguson, like
Brown was the first
Michael
one.
Brown. And if
Yeah,
you go back all the way, I would say it started post Rodney King, but it wasn't like this monumental tectonic eruptional shift. It
no,
was
no,
more insidious. It took
yeah,
20 years, but one little decision led to another, and that snowflake became a snowball to where now
yeah,
we're kind of sitting here receiving this avalanche, right?
yeah.
And while George Floyd was kind of the most prevalent one, I think that we would have had probably the same level of national furor over it if we'd had the same level of social media exposure all those years before.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, social media, it was not what it was, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I mean, now it's pretty much out of control, with the social media stuff. And and here's the thing, I don't want to paint this broad picture of just like everyone sucks who are becoming cops now. We
No,
still
because that's
get
not true.
really No, that's not true. We like
Yeah.
in my department, we have some real good hard charging cops, newer cops on who are, and again, it goes back to like what we were talking about, how you grew up, and that toughness, resiliency, you could see it in these newer officers that are coming. And what's great is you get the mix of the mental toughness as well as the social intelligence that they have when they have to deal with a stressful situation, or whatever you want to call it. So again, I don't want to paint this broad picture that everybody sucks. No, there's like a lot of good cops, but the amount of work that it takes to find those good cops now is a lot more work when versus 20 years ago when I first got on. Like, it was extremely competitive to get on. It's not anymore. Now, it's almost gotten to the point where as long as you're breathing and got a driver's license, you
In
can you
a
can
lot of
become a cop.
departments, yeah, some departments, 200 guys and gals on a waiting list, but
Yeah.
that's part of the problem, right? It's not that the officers being chosen today aren't more capable than we were when we started way back when. It's just there's not as many of them because those same capable people are just going to other industries and other jobs. I know of at least 3 guys that are in their early 20s that all love them to death, but it still hurts. All went to fire instead of law enforcement, partly because of where we are out here and the way things are being handled with law enforcement. But it's like those guys would have been phenomenal cops. They are phenomenal firefighters. But that's 3 players on our team blue that we just lost, right?
Well,
And,
again, those types of guys, those high performing individuals can excel in any industry because just of the way
exactly.
they are. Yeah.
And we just need to incentivize them to become officers, which is a lot of what you talk about, and how to refine that selection. I know this is kind of a fun one because your article's been out for a couple weeks, and I love reading the comments, right?
Oh my God.
especially
Yeah.
especially people that say dumb shit.
Yeah.
um but one of the things, and I think they kind of missed the forest for the trees with what you were saying, was that turning officer selection into like a proxy special forces selection. They got really hung up on that. Like, you can't run them through Q course. You can't do this.
Well,
You can't do
exactly,
that.
but they thought that's what I was saying, but
Right,
no, that's not.
exactly.
You knew what I was saying. A lot, majority of
Yes.
people knew what I was saying, but
Yes.
like you said, it's funny to read the comments on some that just completely missed the point.
Right. And they take it to that hyper extreme response, which par for the course these days. But I did want to talk to you about that because if if people can read top to bottom, left to right, they're going to understand what you said when they read your article. But people
Yeah, yeah,
like come in thinking, oh, selection, and thanks to TV and movies and stuff, immediately that guy jumped to SF type level
yeah,
and
yeah,
churn, right? Because if you've got
yeah,
a 10% pass rate and you
yeah.
need to fill 200 officer vacancies like the city of Portland does, do the math. You're putting over 2,000 people through academy just to fail them. Those are never going to work, right? And
No,
that's not
no,
what you were
no,
saying.
no. That's not what I was saying, and that's the thing. Like, um, even when before we get into the selection with your questions, Jay, I just want to go like little bit past, back memory lane where even actually we'll back up a second because I do talk about, you know, like my agency I worked at. I remember we put out a list just to get, people to apply for the job. And I remember we had 239 names on our list. We sent all of them out, like all the cards out to these individuals, and only a dozen signed up. And even less made it through because of their backgrounds. But it's like back when I went on, like again, I scored a 99, which I was like, oh hell yeah, I scored high, whatever. Dude, there were thousands in front of me. I'm like, and we were all veterans, combat vets, whatever, and it's just the way the scoring was. I'm like, holy shit! Like, I'm one of 1,000 at the score of 99. Like, good luck. Okay, I'm probably never gonna get the job, but
You're special, but you're not unique.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's the thing. And even back then, when I got on, like, it wasn't as rigorous as I thought it was gonna be, but it was. I mean, they really went through a fine tooth comb with you, the psychologicals, all that good stuff. Like, and obviously people still slip through the cracks no matter what. In every industry, you'll have
It's
people
not
slip through
possible
the
not
cracks.
to.
It's not exactly, and the reason why I shifted it to like the selection to be similar. I didn't say should be similar to the Q course, SFQ course, because one of our close friend, Chuck Ritter, Command Sergeant Major retired now, Chuck Ritter, I was talking to him about that. Like, hey, so, when these soldiers are going through selection, what is it you look for? And it was very simple. Like, yeah, we're looking for the guy or gal who has the grit, who has determination. Like, we're not looking for the most fit fucking dude. Like, look at all the most SF guys. They're not your typical, they're not Rambo, right? They're not
No.
like built fucking chiseled and all that. They're just fucking dudes, and that's the thing. And oh, hey, oh, there's your dog.
Wow. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's all right.
Clearly, I'm on the remote setup today.
It's all good. So it's like, to me, in policing, why don't you want people to be the tip of the spear at all times, right? And to me, the Q course, or even the way SF does selection, it tests your tenacity and resilience. Like, it really puts it to the test to see what you're capable of.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the other thing that got missed with that, and I think it's an educational piece, is that people don't realize a lot of whichever branch it is, SF selection isn't so much about somebody gaining, physical prowess to be able to complete a task. What they do a lot of times is put an impossible to complete task in front of people and see who quits.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
The game is you can't win.
Yeah,
Okay, well, if I can't
exactly.
win, or if I start to win, you're going to change the rules on me, so I can't win.
Yep.
How do you respond to that? Right.
Yep.
And that's something I think specifically should transfer to domestic law enforcement in the selection process in particular, because everything domestic compared to armed service is nebulous and
Yep.
abstract, and it's
Yep.
asymmetrical. So you're
Yep.
going to get all these variables coming in at you, and there might be solutions where you have to choose between bad and more bad.
Yeah,
You don't get
exactly.
good and bad, not
No.
black and white, yes and no. It's bad, more bad, or ultra shitty, right? So that is hard to replicate, but it's not, I don't think, all that hard to select the type of personality for that, because you can put challenges in front of people that they can't win, they can't solve.
Yep.
And that's what the
Yep.
Q course does. And I think that's where some of the people in the comments miss that logic jump from what you were saying, because I think that is a huge asset in an evaluation of a potential new officer, or one that you're training, because you can also learn that behavior. You can learn
You can.
how not to quit.
Yep, you can. And so here's I go into the Q course, talking about the Q course and what the instructors look for. And that's my conversation with Chuck. And he literally says what we look for is trainability, which is soldiers' openness to learning and adapting to feedback throughout the rigorous training process. Intelligence, right? Equally important. Cognitive abilities such as critical thinking, problem solving, emotional intelligence. And then you have, mental acuity. Land nav, obviously, in the military is a crucial skill, right? But they have to be proficient in adapting to various, again, that whole thing, adaptability, right? How candidates negotiate physical and mental obstacles, and assessing their creativity and perseverance at the same time. And that's what we're talking about in policing. Some of the issues we deal with, we have to get creative in solving it. And like you said, sometimes we're handed a really shitty call, and the best decision might be a bad decision, but it had to be made. And in that split second that you have to make that decision, you're taking in a million different fucking, what do you want to call it, like input, right? Fucking input overload. You're getting all this information. You got, especially a crazy scene like a bad accident or whatever. You're like going through a million different things, to include emotions, right? And you got to, like, again, dig it deep, because now you got work to do. And then you got to figure out, all right, what's the best thing for this situation right now? Like you said, like you point out, it might not be the best decision, but it has to be a decision that needs to be made.
Well, just to kind of backstop, it could be the best decision that you could make. It just might not be an awesome outcome, in the sense of, I don't want people to misrepresent or misunderstand what I'm saying, which is officers don't go into a situation looking to make a bad decision. They
Oh
just
yeah,
have
yeah,
to
yeah,
make
yeah.
a call, and both outcomes are not something that they would want, but there's no choice there, right? It's the classic, like, save the baby or save the puppy or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, either way something really bad's going to happen, and they have to make a decision. And it's not
Yes.
fair, but it is the reality of the job. And so
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that too, because I'm a little out of
Yeah.
practice with the podcast thing. But that,
Yeah.
yeah, they're going to make the best decision that they can with all of the information they have in that moment,
Well,
and it
that's
just might not
exactly
be
it.
an outcome that anybody would ever choose, but they might not have a choice.
Exactly, and that's the thing. We go back to, like, we're dealt with the so you get your dispatch, right? Dispatch tells you, hey, you got to go to X address for a stabbing or whatever, right? Well, officer, all he or she knows is, all right, I'm on my way to a stabbing. Okay, get there. Now we got to assess what's going on. Sometimes it's not. It wasn't even like, I've dealt with these types of calls where it wasn't even a stabbing. Like,
Yeah,
stabbing, a knife was never even
yeah,
involved. But you have to, that's the thing, I think, with like having a selection process where it forces officer candidates, we'll call them, officer candidates, to really have to critically think, versus, like, here's the thing, like, versus being on a oral board panel where you're getting bombarded with situations, quote unquote, and you got to answer them, right? No, how about put them through these scenarios, right? And have them, you got to critically think, because that's what, as soldiers, even going through the Q course, or even prior to the Q course, that's what we have to do. Like, you got to be able to run the scenario and see, you're going to have to make that decision in real time, versus in an oral board where, you saw this cop do X, and you're like, well,
right.
well, what I should be doing is blah blah blah, notify the sergeant and go blah blah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, why don't we act it out and see how it actually happens? So that's the thing. Like, one of the things, and equally important, that, in the Q course, they look at teamwork. They see how you work in a team,
Yes.
and because it's very important. And even like in policing, right? In like the city I work in, city of close to 80,000, you might have 7, 10, 12, 15 officers working the road. Well, that's a small team for that population. And you have to be able to work in small teams. You have to have that open communication, that trust amongst each other, right? And you need to show that decision making skills under stress, proving they can remain composed with quick, effective choices, especially when working with limited resources, which that's what policing is.
That
We are
and that
working with
Yeah.
limited resources.
And sometimes that limited resource could be personnel, right?
Hmm.
Maybe not equipment. Like, people be like, a lot of times when
Yeah,
we say resources, and we've seen this firsthand, they immediately go to, oh, well, we need better squad cars, or we need more of whatever piece of hardware. And it's like, no, it's actually humanware,
people.
like
Yeah,
people.
it's people.
and
People.
whether it's admin or not. And it's interesting you say that too, because out here, where population density isn't the same as where you are, our town has got 40,000 roughly, and at any given time, which no one wants to hear this, but there might be 3 officers on patrol.
Eesh, that's rough.
Yeah, and maybe a sergeant, right? So
Yeah,
maybe you got 4.
yeah.
And there's a lot of neighboring towns like that. So almost every single city out here has to rely on their neighboring departments to backfill and augment if something goes really sideways, which means you have to be independently capable for a period of time that might make you uncomfortable. But then you also have to be ready, willing, and able to come up with a solution or keep working the problem with another agency that might have different policies than you do, might have different backgrounds and personalities than you do as far as the officers go. Like, there's so many factors that go into it. If you can't be, and I don't want to say like you can't pick a side kind of guy or gal, but if you can't be malleable to the people that you're working with, you're going to have a really hard time in this industry, because there's just so many different backgrounds and polar opposites now. You got to be willing to work across the spectrum, or you're not going to be working very long.
Yeah, exactly, and this day and age, it's we were me and a few of the we'll call them old timers now that we're the old timers on the job, but we were talking about some of the stuff like hey, this is what we used to do, blah blah blah. But again, times have changed, and we that one thing we said is yeah, we adapt to the times. Some are not able to. Some are just so stuck in their ways. They're the ones that really do not last after that because yeah, there's the world changes all the time, and that's the thing is we have to be able to adapt and overcome, and that's the thing. Like taking in from what lessons learned from the Q course or even like some of the lessons that they teach, it's like yeah, because they're seeking again trainability, intelligence, teamwork, right? And to me, what is wrong with having those sort of standards in our police selection process, right? And for them to be able to, the officers in training or the trainee, demonstrate the ability to critically think, as especially when you have like a challenge in front of you that you didn't think how many times have you heard, well, I thought I've seen it all, but now I'm dealing with this, I mean,
Right.
I still say that weekly almost,
Yeah. But with the experience that you have, your brain has mapped out so many different pathways of experiences that while it's not the exact same as something you've seen, perhaps that's a item being put in a place that you've never seen an item like that put
Yeah,
before. We'll just leave it at
yeah.
that because that story is disgusting, by the way.
Yeah, no. Yeah, well, we won't relive that.
Definitely not that one.
Yeah.
But the point of that is that well, you might not have seen that exact same thing. You've seen something similar enough to where your brain can make that logical jump of that gap because you've mapped it. It's no
Yeah,
different than riding a bike, right? You
yeah,
you learn to ride a bike, you'll never forget it. You might not be as sharp,
yeah.
but you could take off and not be on a bike for 15 years and then hop back on. It's like, oh, I can still ride the bike because your brain mapped that pattern. And I think what gets hung up in some of the conversation around implementing our military standards to domestic law enforcement inclusive of the selection process is people have this giant fear of militarization of the police. Newsflash, it already happened. We're
Yeah.
already equipment wise there because, and you can, this is probably another podcast in itself. Did the escalation of militarized tactics by law enforcement have an echo effect against the bad guys, upping their game as well? No different than when we first went over into the Middle East, smashed the shit out of the Taliban and ISIS, and then they adapted and they started changing their tactics, which became much more lethal against us. So it's a chicken and egg thing of militarizing the police. The reality is, where we are today is where we are today. There's no going back. It's like trying to change the tide with a tablespoon at the
Yeah,
shore of the ocean. It ain't fucking happening.
yeah.
But if we can get past the kind of, ooh, it makes me feel gross that the police are paramilitary. The military comes with so much more than just high-speed looking kit and physical equipment. It comes with a skill set and a mental fortitude that is, we'll call it software for your brain. That is something that 100% should transfer to the domestic scene because, again, the levels and escalations of potential violence, acted upon violence, and I'm not talking like easy linear stuff like a gunfight. I'm talking human trafficking, the sexual exploitation of minors online. I mean, there's so much more spectrum and it moves so fast now. We need that skill set and we need to have that capability
Well, I
on the
mean I mean
domestic front.
I mean, look at, with domestic terrorism, right? And why are cops now being equipped the way we're being equipped? For the last, I don't know, especially after September 11th. It's like well, because the threat of international terrorism and domestic terrorism is real, and we are as a society in the US not equipped. We weren't equipped to deal with that until it actually happened. And to me, the whole idea of militarization of the police, like you said, well, it's already happened, but it's because we had to respond and adapt to the threats that are coming from, coming into the country, within the country, just like the famous LAPD bank robbery, right?
Right.
LAPD was clearly not equipped to
Outgunned.
handle that, outgunned. I mean, you got guys with level 4 body armor head to toe, friggin' just ripping rounds at, the traditional cop who was not ready for that. I mean, those cops were still shooting revolvers,
Yeah,
they were not ready.
they and that's another, I mean, that'd be a fun episode to break down with a couple of our other buddies, just to go back over that, because it's ancient history now.
I
But
know, I know.
again, like Rodney King was kind of the front. I mean, I and again, for everybody listening, I know he wasn't the only one, but it was kind of the first mass publicized event like that, with clearly officers that all belonged in jail and were, yeah, I mean, we're all on the same page with that. But when you start talking about when information starts getting shared quicker and at a larger scale, that Hollywood bank robbery, that really changed the game, because while
Did.
there were other violent I mean, go back to the 30s,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You got Dillinger and all those
Oh, yeah,
guys.
John Dillinger,
They were
absolutely.
just as violent, if not more so. And that didn't spread like wildfire like things can now, and it's because information can be instantly exchanged today. And to the point of the domestic terrorist threat, we have more ability to move across the planet at faster rates and shorter times, that the level of readiness, we no longer have time for a SWAT call out to surround and
No.
execute a plan when it comes to a school shooting, because by the time SWAT shows up, it's probably over. So now our patrol officers have to be at that level of readiness, right?
Well, so yeah, I mean, real quick, I give an example of, before I went away, before I went out
Before I
medical.
went away,
Yeah,
he did
yeah,
not
before I
get
went away,
committed.
I
He's
mean,
fine.
medical. Yeah, no, before I went medical, um, we had this. I don't know if I was in the station. I was just shooting the shit with the dispatcher. All of a sudden, fucking 911 going off the rails. He picks up, and I could hear the screaming on the other side of the phone that, my roommate, he's got a machete, he's trying to fucking kill him, blah blah blah. And you could, I'm like, whoop, I'm leaving. So we ran out, like, guys were just dumping out of the station, and that in my head already, and the location was literally 2 minutes from the PD. So we hop in and we go, and multiple units showed up, and it was, to me at that point, a hostage rescue. Well, traditionally, what do we do with hostage rescues or anything like that? We surround and
Yep.
call in
Yep.
SWAT, and then you got to wait an hour by the time the entire team gets there, and then by then everyone's dead who needed it. It doesn't work that way anymore.
Nope.
Now we have to go in. So
Exactly.
we literally stacked up as if we're a SWAT team, and we just went and did what we had to do, did the job, and everyone was safe, and including the suspect, everyone was good to go. But in my head, I was already thinking lethal force. Like, I was already in that mindset. And that's the thing. If you do not have those sort of tactics or learn those sort of moves and stuff like the military, the way it does, you wouldn't have these types of end results that are more positive than negative.
Or at least the end result would be like the Tennessee shooter, where the victim count was minimized because of the rapid response, right?
Yeah.
And to your point of your article, mimicking SF type selection tactics and procedures, but also training, it's funny, we really should take more lessons from the fire department, because they don't have time, if something's on fire, to sit there and have, the firefighter version of SWAT show up, right?
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah,
first
yeah,
guys
yeah.
on scene are in there putting water on the fire. Why? Because fire moves fast. All the other things that go with that, no one would consider that a militarized response, but it is extremely fast and it's extremely aggressive, because the threat level's so high to life and property-ish, but really life, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time, if they know the structure's clear, they're going to let it burn, or at least just not put anybody else at risk. But to save people, they're in there fast. And if we look at the way that the fire department recruits, but also trains, it looks a lot like the military.
Yeah, exactly.
95%, well, 90% of their day is spent training. 5% is spent cooking, and the
Yeah.
other 5% is spent on actual calls. I'm
Yeah.
kidding. It's more like 15% cooking, but
I was just gonna say, you might want to adjust that.
you get the point, right? They're
Yeah, yeah,
training
yeah.
10-to-1 over their responses and their field actions. And
Yep.
law enforcement is literally the inverse and
Yeah.
worse. And
Yeah.
so, if anything, the fire department is currently deploying a militarized system in their recruitment and their training
Let
for their firefighters. And we all know
Well,
everybody
let's
loves a
think about
firefighter.
this. Why are they called battalions? Why are they called
Exactly.
like yeah, those are all military titles. You know, why are they called battalions? Why are they called platoons? Why is this? Like, yeah, why is squad A and squad B working? Well, those are all military
Exactly.
terms. You know, those are all
Exactly.
military things.
So
So,
we I think that effectively will prove to anybody who might be a naysayer listening to this episode or reading your article about, well, we can't militarize the police. Like, bitch, we've already done that with the fire
yeah,
department
yeah,
domestically. It works.
yeah.
Everybody, for the most part, loves our military and our veterans, and they don't think twice about it because their conflicts are offshore outside of here. If we could just kind of remove the social stigma from, cops with scary black guns and just look at the structure of the entire process, I think we're going to have a much more reasonable conversation about shifting that recruitment capability and finding more of the right people that we already have.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's the thing, and part of my one of my arc, I go into a little rant of just kind of in order to find the best candidate for a job, like I'm sure you have. I've seen people that just immoral, unethical, untruthful in the profession, and shake my head like, yeah, those are those cops, those types of cops. We call them a lawsuit waiting to happen, or worse, a bad shooting waiting to happen. Unfortunately, the current civil service laws in this country make it nearly impossible to fire them. Right? And again, we don't make the laws though. We don't
Correct.
make those rules. Those rules are being done by people in ivory towers that just sit there and come up with the good idea fairy and just say, you know what? I feel that, these individuals are being, whatever, and they don't need to do we need to allow them to become cops. Now, I'm all for equal opportunity and everyone should have the ability to, but when you're talking about certain professions where it's life and death, no, we need to be a little more rigorous with our selection
It's
process.
it's still equal opportunity if you meet the standards. And
Exactly.
that's the difference. I mean, I wouldn't say that medical school is an equal opportunity because you look at the doctors coming out of our medical schools, whether they're surgeons or non-surgical, it's a smorgasbord of ethnicities, backgrounds,
Oh yeah.
genders, everything,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
commonality is they all have to meet the same standards. What we don't have in this country right now, uniform across the country, is a standard of care or a standard of practice across law enforcement departments. We have a lot of really great departments, and even in the shitty departments, you have a lot more great cops in that department than you do shitty ones. And people forget because it's so front facing and public. 99% of law enforcement interactions with civilians are nothing. It's stop and talk, maybe cite and release or a warning or what, right? I mean, hundreds of millions of interactions and nothing happens. But when one thing goes sideways, it is so easy to blow that up in the public spectrum now. The perception becomes this is how it is for everybody.
Well,
And
that's
that's
welcome to
not
the
to say,
media.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
that's
welcome to
not
the
to say
media.
there aren't problems. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that. It's
Yeah.
and a lot of it comes down to training, which
Yeah.
comes down to selection and then
Yeah.
going through that training. So not every problem's avoidable. You could put them through the perfect training pipeline, just like firefighters do, and still end up with a guy that's a shitbag or a
Well,
gal that's a shitbag
so
on the back end of it during an interaction with the public. But by the numbers, we do a pretty good job.
Well, so here's the thing, like, I go over the story of, years ago, I arrested this one guy, me and my partner, we were out doing street crimes, and he was at a park, and we saw him like crushing pills up, right? And, like literally, just the way he was parked was already like, huh, what's going on there? Like, we thought maybe passed out. Like there was something just it didn't feel right. So we go into the park, there were kids playing and stuff like that. Just go check on him. Like, hey, let's go check on him. And I remember I'm calling it in. My partner's walking up to the car. All of a sudden, I see him motion to me, doing like, hey, get over here. I'm like, oh shit. I get over there and I'm watching and we're seeing this dude literally crushing up oxys. And getting ready to sniff him, and I'm like, "Whoa, buddy, let's stop right there." So he ends up getting locked up, obviously, and all that. Then we find out that he was working on becoming a firefighter. He was going through the process and all that stuff. And so one thing led to another, and all of a sudden, like months later, I get a letter in the mail that I had to go testify before the Civil Service Commission because this suspect who was trying to become a firefighter, his claims were, he claimed that I was out to get him. Even though I've never dealt with this dude in my life, I was out to get him. They had to pull in my entire like log of whether it's FIOs, car stops, whatever. They pulled my history to see if this dude's name was anywhere. His name was never there. Like I don't know this kid, but that's where his claims. I pretty much laughed at every single one of them. But in the end, he was found guilty and removed him from the civil service. But to me, I'm like, you know, why did it have to get to that point where you entertain this fucking kid? Like, I get it.
Yeah.
There's a process. A process needs to be done. But when the claims are that outlandish, why even waste taxpayer money to put me up on a stand to friggin' testify?
Well, and I put that to, for lack of a better term, he's probably got a little more privilege than other people in his position because that's expensive, right? It's going to cost money. So if you want to pay to play, everybody's afforded due process, should be afforded due process. Is it a waste of taxpayer money? Yes. Is it 9 out of 10 cases going that way? No, he's an anomaly. But the point still stands, the lack of capability for accountability. The fire department that he was applying to should have sent you a thank you plaque because
Yeah.
a guy like that on the job, I mean, forget about the substance abuse side. It's the lack of accountability for your actions that when you fuck up, you're going to put it on somebody else. God knows what he would have done in the field. And I guess the flip side of that would be maybe that interaction with you guys turned his life around and all that kind of stuff. And he became a great firefighter and all those kind of things. And I think to Chuck Ritter's article, his first article, by the way, with Havoc Journal, it was spectacular,
Yes.
but
I
talking
love
about basically
that
like,
story.
all of his shit show
Yeah.
stories of being a kid. And it's like, right. Redemption stories start with a pretty big negative fall. And maybe that's how that would have gone for that guy. The problem is that's not really your job. Your job is to just deal with what's in front of you and what was presented. What he presented to you was an oxy sniffing
Yeah.
addict that
Yeah.
had to be dealt with, and then he didn't like the repercussions after because he sobered up. Right. Well,
What's even
okay.
funnier, what's funnier is the attorneys and all that. They kept telling me like, all he had to do was just accept and let it go for the next couple years, let it die
Yeah.
out, and then reapply, and he probably
Yeah.
would have had the job,
Yeah.
cleaned himself up and good to go, and that's it. Like that's all it would have took. But
Yeah.
he wanted to take it to that level, and even worse, he wanted to be an EMS, which they got morphine,
Access
they
to
got
drug.
access to some heavy, the friggin' what was that Haldol where you really calm a friggin' psycho down, like
Yeah.
they've got some heavy duty drugs in those ambulances. So can you imagine like a guy like that who has access to that shit? Like, forget that. But again, the selection process. So we'll go back to selection process of police officers. It's got to have a fundamental transformation, like one of those transfer. It needs to have more qualified individuals and entrusted with the ability to make decisions, and who embody integrity, adaptability, critical thinking, for effective policing. And again, like I said, drawing inspiration, which I'm not saying, yeah, we need to be exactly like ourselves. No, but again, that's what people miss. It's like, yeah, we're drawing this inspiration from the rigorous standards and training from the Q course, right? Law enforcement agencies can create a more demanding selection process that evaluates these key things that special forces looks for: trainability, decision making under pressure, emotional resilience, emotional intelligence. Like those things are extremely important for this job, because if you do not have those qualities, you're just a walking disaster waiting to happen.
At best, you burn out. At worst, you burn up on reentry during a call, and it's got all kinds of side effects. The whole thing cycles around, and again, everything goes in cycles. And it's kind of one of our favorite things. Hard times create hard men create easy times create soft men create hard times. And I think where we're at, I hope, is that we got to the soft men create hard times in our cycle here, right? And this is the step back to soft men, hard times, hard men.
Yeah.
That an adjustment like this will take us out of the hard times into not hard men in a negative sense, but resilient. And I'm sorry, but I still agree with the warrior mentality. It's better to be the warrior in the garden than the the gardener in the war, right?
Yeah.
And that's not something to shy away from. It's just we've gotten so far down the other side of the pendulum that it's created these hard times in law enforcement. We're feeling
Hmm.
it, and it's
Hmm.
evidenced by the choices that cities like the one north of me are making of,
Yeah.
let's decriminalize all hard drugs.
How
Oh,
did that work?
fuck. That's a bad idea. We need to undo this. Like,
I love that
sorry.
article.
Oh my God. It's going to be, they're like, sorry, but it's the next election cycle to get that dealt with. And what they've seen is that these soft policies, because it's men and women, but these soft policies and soft officer recruitments and soft backstopping of officers doing their job have created these impossibly hard times for the city of Portland to now, because I hope it hit rock bottom. We've got candidates coming up for election here that are very pro law enforcement,
Good.
very much about cleaning up the street, because the reality is rampant drug use, open essential turnstiles at the police precinct where they're not even done with the paperwork and the guy's walking out, right, does not create a safe environment. People who are wanting to take advantage will find the soft places to take advantage of and go do that.
Oh
Violent
yeah.
crime is up, drug use is up, our business, and commerce is collapsed. We have a big building downtown, and it's called the Big Pink. You have a bazillion of them in Boston, but like we have kind of like one because it's Oregon and no one lives
Yeah.
here. But
Yeah.
Big Pink is, I think, 72% vacant, and it's
Oh,
projected to
Jesus.
default. And this is a massive 60 something, 70 stories. This is a big building for us,
Okay.
and it's empty.
Is it like your financial district,
It's
sort of?
in the downtown financial district, yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, we don't really have it like you guys do in Boston. It's like it's next to and proxy to what used to be the Diamond District and a lot of retail
Okay.
shops.
Gotcha.
But like Apple is gone, REI left, Nike closed. It's all this stuff that's happened, and the city lost in 2023. The census, they lost 33,000 residents that left the city, moved out.
That's a big number.
It's a huge number for
Well,
such a
I remember when I flew out there, and everybody that I spoke to about Portland said, "Oh, we go around Portland. Like no one
oh yeah,
drives through." Like I remember, I've never been to Portland, but I
no.
remember like my wife
Why would I
being from
take you?
Washington State. Well, my wife being from Washington State,
Yeah.
one of their places where they used to go is Portland, and San Francisco and stuff like that. She said Portland was like a beautiful
was awesome.
city, and San Francisco, same thing, and whatever. But it was interesting, and even overhearing people at the airport, like this one lady, she grew up in Portland, as a kid and stuff like that, and then she came for a like a family wake or something, and she said she was heartbroken by
Yeah.
what she saw in the city. She said it
Yeah.
is she said she couldn't believe what the city turned into.
Yeah. And if you take the timelines and stretch it out long enough, I do think it's going to be okay, because there's nowhere to go but up, right?
Yeah,
You're not going
yeah.
to, this is the United States of America. This is the best fucking country in the planet in the history of humanity of all time. Like, there is no way any city is going to stay at the bottom in perpetuity. It has nowhere to go but up. I'm hoping we're at the bottom so that we get there. But the point of that is, all of the law enforcement disempowerment that happened, it appears with this election cycle, is making a shift into the direction of your call out or call to action in your article about, hey, not just more cops, more better cops.
Yeah, exactly. And so it goes into actually, this is actually good time to segue into those who make those decisions as to like me as a cop. Yeah, I'm a sergeant, whatever. Like I have no say in a lot of city politics and state politics and fucking like I'm just another citizen, right? Yeah, granted veteran, blah blah blah, whatever, but dude, I'm just another dude. That's
Yep.
all I am.
Disguised as
And
another dude playing another dude.
I pretty much feel that way. but you have an article coming out on Tuesday,
I do.
which happens to be on election day.
How convenient.
And exactly how convenient. I wonder how you timed that or
Oh, yeah, weird.
but your article literally is going to talk about this kind of next part of, you know, why it's become this way. It's not just the guys, the boots on the ground that are making the shit up. Oh no, people got elected into certain positions, and now we have to deal with those people who got elected. And speaking of elections, like I remember at our in over here on this side of the East Coast, because you're West Coast, East Coast, but on this side, like city like the city I worked in of 80,000. And our previous mayor, which had some questionable qualities and whatever else, but the only reason why he got 2 terms was because only 3,000 people actually voted in a city of 80,000.
Yeah.
3,000 people voted.
Yeah.
So Jake, talk about a little bit about that.
Well, that actually is essentially the backbone of what I wrote about, was that in a city of 80,000, you don't even have a 10% turnout. The only threat to our way of life, whether you're right, left, red, blue, purple in the middle, whatever, the only threat to your and our existence is apathy. If you don't have an energized presence and ability to stand up and voice, not just your opinion, but deploy your number one weapon system in a democracy, which is a vote, and you're just apathetic, like, oh, it doesn't matter. I live in Oregon. Our electoral college votes always go blue, right? Whether I vote blue or I vote red, I vote. It doesn't make any difference to me that I know that the outcome is probably predetermined. I'll still go down swinging, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And what you experienced directly was so many people buying into that narrative that their vote doesn't matter because the outcome's predetermined. Only 3,000 showed up.
Yeah.
Is fucking appalling. It is unbelievably appalling. And besides just disrespectful to the history of this country, it's really short-sighted, because the thing, and I talk about this in the article, so I won't like bang over the head with it, but the thing that those who are in power want more of is more power, right?
Oh, exactly. Yep.
Very few people have ever said, I've had enough, I'm going to step aside. If 1 is good, 2 is better, 4 is more, and then it just becomes more. And whether it's for financial reasons or just currency of power and trade, they don't leave. And the only way to affect change in this country, and it was written into the Constitution for a reason, is to vote. And if you're not voting, I got no time for you. Like, really. And to be honest, you should look at yourself in the mirror and be disappointed in yourself, because whether your team, air quotes team, is going to lose or win, it's not nearly as relevant as maintaining control of the number one weapon you have in the metaphorical fight for the future of this company or country as a democracy, which is voting. There's all sorts of tactics, and I kind of talk about them a little bit, but there's all sorts of tactics that the other side, whichever side you're on, uses to try to get you to feel disenfranchised, but also demotivated. And that could come through bullshit information campaigns projecting success. Like, hey, pre-polling indicators show candidate A is winning in a landslide. A lot of people that might support candidate A will say, oh, well, I don't really need to get off my ass on Tuesday then, because we got it good. not realizing that disinformation is a tactic.
Oh, it's a big tactic.
Yeah, and it's extremely effective because, to be honest, our culture is lazy as fuck, and we'll
Oh,
sit there
yeah.
and be like, "Oh, if the outcome's predetermined, I don't need to get off my ass." And the unfortunate part is that's exactly what you need to do.
Well, that's the thing, and the more, and here's the thing, you were just saying how power, the people with power want more power. I don't remember where I read this or who said it, but it's one of those things that you're like, a true test of character is giving somebody power and see what they do with it. And again, I don't remember exactly where I read it, but I remember it stuck with me since I was young. And it's so true. I mean, even fellow veterans that know this and other police officers, what happens when a cop makes rank or a soldier goes from private specialist and becomes an NCO or officer? Like, you can tell how shitty they're going to be by immediately how they changed into this all of a sudden god complex
Yeah,
egotistical type thing.
yeah,
So it's like a real thing. It's like a real thing. Like
yeah.
power corrupts. You
Well, and are
know.
they going to be badge heavy? Is the way we
Yep.
would refer to it, right? And that or it empowers, right? And I don't want this to think that like there are really good leaders in a lot of places, in a lot of
Absolutely.
positions, in the House, in the Senate, at your local level, congressional districts. I mean, there are really good people working their asses off, right? In a toxic waste system of an
Yeah.
environment, right?
Yeah.
And kind of like really good officers do the job and don't get noticed. The same goes with our political people. It's they might be doing however you want to say it, God's work or whatever, but it gets it's not noticed because it's not flamboyant. They're working on policy to affect various different things in their communities that just aren't sexy. It's like, oh, well, we need to bolster utilities infrastructure, so we're going to do this policy and that, and it's all just real, in a positive way, bureaucratic stuff versus kind of the hyper stylized and segregationally driven messages of speaking to one side to empower a base to do something. A lot of that is just it's rhetoric, but it has an impact, right? Because we're all so consumed with our phones and media, and the thing
It's a
that I'm
tactic, like you said.
it's a
It's a
total
tactic.
tactic.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna use you as a case example because I can do it. But the worst response is, I know you took a break from social media, right? You
Yep.
took a
Yep.
break. There's a difference
Yep.
between taking a break and quitting, right?
Yep.
But a
Yep.
lot of people are like, fuck it, I'm out. They delete their social media. They don't do anything. Again, apathy. It's like, I'm not saying you're going to change the tone of social media, but and you might not even change the outcome of Tuesday's elections at the highest level of the president, but you can absolutely have impact on your local, the mayoral candidates, your city council, your commissioners. Those absolutely have impact, and even though it's not going to change in the next 2 years, maybe it's
Yep.
that snowflake, right? That we
Yep.
want to make a snowball that makes an avalanche to affect change. So if you've listened to this podcast and you're like, I really want my police department to get on board with better training. Okay, the first thing you can do is send your ballot in now or show up to the booth on Tuesday and vote for those candidates that want to put not just money for the sake of money into your civil servants, but training. What's their policy? What's their where's their future planning looking? Are they just looking to do more of the same because it feeds some third party fiscal benefit to them? Or is this some up and comer who's just kind of fucking had it with the system, wants to make some change? Go back that person. Because even if you lose, right? And this is kind of what I say in the article too, like, I want people that disagree with me to have a really good argument, not because I want to disagree and get in a fight, but because I want to learn more about their position so that I can try and strengthen my stance on something, especially if I feel it's something, really like I really do believe in.
Well,
And
what's
it's
great about this country is we're allowed to have those types of tough
right.
conversations and still be best friends. Like, it doesn't
Well,
really
yeah.
matter.
And the other thing too is people take it for granted. And I laugh when I see some of these protests like, oh, again, I've said it before, but like the Queers for Palestine thing, I get
Oh,
that, right? Okay.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
glad that they've rallied around what they think is a message of liberation, right? The
Yeah, yeah,
irony is if they walk down the street in any of those countries
yeah.
as
They won't survive.
queer or transgender or anything else,
No,
they're
they
going
won't
to
make it.
learn real quick what the asphalt feels like when they get thrown off the top of the building.
Well,
So,
yeah. I mean, we saw ISIS do that in Iraq
yeah,
after we abandoned that fucking
yes.
another one,
And
and
I,
we saw the
yeah,
videos of them throwing, gay
yeah,
Iraqis off the top of the buildings, and it actually, it's funny. Just real quick, I was watching this thing. I guess this First Amendment auditor type was in South Korea. Did you see this
I
video?
saw that.
Okay, he gets knocked out by a Korean SF guy, and I'm like, you know what? The rest of the world does not put up with your bullshit. Like, they do not play this fucking game and the dude got rocked, and I was laughing so hard because I'm like, fuck yeah. I'm like, welcome to the rest of the world.
Well, and that's the thing that we're on an island. It just happens to be the continent of North America, but it is an island protected by two oceans on each side. And so we kind of get siloed into this where it's like, we haven't had anybody external to unite around to fight for a while. So we're kind of fighting each other. Not that I want to have an external threat for us
Yeah,
to fight, right? I'm not saying that.
yeah.
But it is a reality that that's kind of what ends up happening, like idle hands, and we start fighting our siblings, right?
Oh, that's the thing. Yeah,
And I I I definitely don't want any organization of people that feel commonality of a message to be suppressed, even if it's whatever white supremacists, right? Okay,
yeah,
well,
yeah,
show me you're a white supremacist. Put all that information out there so we can all see that and then know exactly who you are. Because I want to know as much about my opponent or enemy as possible. And if you start suppressing information or not participating in the system, i.e., not voting, I
yeah,
don't know as much as I can know to strengthen my stance of what I might believe is an altruistic position. And I think if everybody could kind of get back to that, where it's like, hey, you might be pro life, I'm pro choice, but what's your reasoning? And I can understand your position better. That'll make me better at making my case and give me a stronger stance to stand on. And then by voting, presumptively we'll be able to control that and hopefully win because everybody wants their side, air quotes,
yeah,
to be victorious.
yeah.
And a give and take and a balance is important. All of one thing is not good.
No, no,
None
it's
of
never
one
good.
thing, other than I will say none of no anti-Semitism would be good.
Yeah,
No homophobia would be good. No racism would be good. Though, but those are pretty easy like layups. But it's just so tough because so many people are just so over it with everything going on. And I mean, we don't need to say their names. Everybody knows who we're talking about. It's been all over the news since honestly the last election.
yeah,
But I think what people lose sight of is your vote still matters. You can change things. You might not be able to change the top of the pyramid right now, but you can start exchanging blocks at the bottom at the local level by voting. And that is
yes.
really the bulk of what I talk about in the article is just like,
No, that's
hey,
that's
this is what happens if you don't. Go look at
That's what's
history.
true. I mean I
Yeah.
mean, here's the thing, like, with the ballots and everything, yeah, I voted and all that, and you know what? I was more paying attention to what's going on in the state and
Yeah.
local than
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, federal, maybe I don't have much of a say, whatever it is, but at least locally, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna vote even more locally, especially because a lot of these policies, laws, whatever, are gonna affect us directly even more. I mean, quick example is like during the 4th of July, I was working and, yeah, fireworks, whatever, whatever. And I remember I went to this one house party. They were doing fireworks and they hate their neighbors, whatever. And
Yeah.
it turns out that the neighbor is one of the city councilors. And, well, I hate them, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, I mean, did you vote? Well,
Right.
no. Then I was like, then you don't have an argument.
Yeah.
I'm like, then you don't have an argument. I was like, if you did not even vote, don't e you have to live with what you have. It
Yeah.
is what it is. Well, I'm
Yeah.
voting next time. Well, I hope you go vote.
Good.
Like, go.
Yeah.
Voice your opinion. Do it,
And
And that's the thing, like, I think if people realize, like, if you went to Iraq when I was there, like, when people were allowed to vote, you saw such, an interest. I mean, the entire country of Iraq almost went and they all voted, and it was such a protected right that we had to teach the Iraqi army, the Iraqi people, like, hey, this is such a big deal that these people need to be protected because you had Al Qaeda, you had all sorts of different groups trying to, thwart the elections. But if you take that situation there and then bring it here, people I think would appreciate voting a lot more.
They would, and I think that's why it's so important that our veterans in particular voice that, because they have gone external to our shores and they have seen what it looks like everywhere else firsthand. I think we're getting better at opening the dialogue around that and articulating that, because we
Yeah.
hear, various different people on their various podcasts that are, millions of listeners saying the same thing. So I think we're okay. I'm always optimistic about that. But the flip side is it can be so overwhelming thinking that you just don't matter because you are just one little person in the country of 360 plus million. But you have the most devastating weapon system there is in a democracy, and that is your vote. And if you don't use it and you just don't care and it gets taken away from you, it's over, right? I mean, it's why our forefathers and foremothers wrote the Constitution the way they did, because they grew up in a totalitarian
Yep.
world
Yep.
and they knew what that vote meant being capable of doing. It doesn't mean you always win, and it doesn't.
Well, you bring the forefathers to today, they will be pissed at what
Yeah,
is going. They will see that people have the modern age has bastardized their
they've
dream.
squandered opportunity, but we've
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
improved a lot too,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
mean, not for not, there's a lot of things that are a lot better. I think that the danger is the tipping point where people just get to apathy because they just don't care, because they're just so inundated with it. And it's like you just have to have that resolve to not let yourself get there. Even if you know you're going to lose, go down swinging.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
it's just like the last scenario training. It's like I had a sim pistol malfunction, and I was not confident that I was going to get any rounds off anymore because I kept the sim pistol
Yeah.
sometimes can be that way. And I was like,
Yeah.
if I got 3 shots, if I got 2 shots, if I only got one, I'm not going to sit here and air quotes training die in the corner behind this car. I'm taking the fight to them,
Yep.
and I might not win, I might win, but at least I'm going to shoot my shot. I'm not going to sit here and just get run over.
Just that I'm thinking of that movie that once it was a Mission Impossible 3 where Tom Cruise had the one bullet in his MP5 and he just fucking sends it
Yeah,
to the bad guy and takes out the
yeah.
bad guy. I'm like, yep, that's
Yeah,
that's
it's
exactly
like
what
the
I'm
one.
picturing.
I go to John McClane Die Hard because that's actually what I was thinking, because it was like
Yeah,
sitting there. I'm
yeah.
like,
Actually, yeah, that's the other one. Yeah.
I'm ripping the shitty rounds out and I'm looking like, I think I got 2 that'll work. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is a Die Hard moment. I got my chance. I didn't look nearly as cool, by the way, and I got shot too, but we both got shot, so it was kind of a
Oh,
draw. But
whatever. Yeah, yeah,
point being
exactly.
is take your swing. Don't just leave it in the chamber, because you can't use it if you're dead, right? You can't,
Yeah,
if you lose the
exactly.
vote, you're never going to get it back. And even if you lose, go out punching. And that's a lot of what I talk about in the article, because I don't care how people vote. I really don't. It's just
Yeah.
a matter of I want everybody
Oh,
to
just go out
participate.
there. Just go
Yeah,
out
just
there
do
and
it.
just do it.
Just
Yeah,
do
yeah.
it.
Just go. I mean, and they make it so modern times make it so easy.
It really
Like,
is.
like, yes, like fucking do it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
there's no
just go.
excuse. There really
No,
is no
no, not
excuse.
not
Even if
these
you have to
days.
go to a voting booth and do it old school, you can do it. Everybody can do it. So just please, if you take nothing else out of that article, or you don't agree with me, whatever, I don't know, but just go fucking vote and make it a point to make your voice heard, even if it's one that's going to get drowned out by other stuff, because then you won't have any regrets looking back. You might not
Exactly.
win, or you might
Well,
win, and then it's like, hey,
well,
great.
you might win, and you won, and that's the thing. And we finally are able to move the country in the direction we
Yeah,
want it to
move the
move.
needle.
Move the needle a certain way. And I'm glad in Portland that they're finally
I
waking
think
up to
so.
realize.
We'll find
Hopefully
out
they,
Tuesday, right? I
yeah,
mean, they're
hopefully they
burning
clean it
ballot
up more.
boxes and shit. So it's like, clearly we've got some
Dude,
motivated
only in
people.
Portland.
Well, I think a
I'm
lot of it
like,
is just we have a lot of people that like to make a lot of noise and be disruptive and destructive. Not necessarily that they have a big political agenda with it. They're trying to prohibit some specific outcome, because how the fuck would they
yeah,
know what was in there? They're
yeah,
just doing
yeah,
it just to be shitheads, honestly.
assholes.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
but it also shows and exemplifies the power that voting has. If somebody thinks that the biggest damage that they can inflict is to go light ballots on fire, that should tell you everything you need to know about the power of the vote. And
You know
that's
what? It's again, not to compare or do like anything like that, but I remember like again in Iraq, like worried about suicide bombers going into these voting
right.
booths to blow a bunch of
Yep.
people up, and you're like, and these fuckers over here are just burning the ballot boxes. Like I don't think people realize the impact alone just with that. Like, whether you're burning ballots or going in doing fucking mass shootings, whatever, because people are voting, guess what? That's how important it
That
is.
shows you the power of that weapon system.
Yeah, so well, come Tuesday, we'll see what happens,
We'll
but
see. Whether it's the
yeah,
outcome you want or not, I hope the turnout is more than we've ever had, right?
yeah,
Just move that number up,
exactly,
and
exactly.
always make sure and take a look at your candidates and see what they stand for, and look at how they handle civil service and what their approaches are towards police. If they're hyper left or hyper right, just know who you're voting for or who you're voting
Yeah.
against, and make as best of an educated decision as you can and participate. That's
I-
all
I'll
that
tell you
we
right now,
really
like
want.
some of my votes, like they were, for a state senator or whatever. Like, one of the state senators, he's a Democrat, but is great with
Yeah,
civil servants. Like,
yeah,
takes the shirt off his back
yeah,
for you, right? So to me, it doesn't matter, red, blue. I don't give a shit. But if you are for positive changes in the country, you help civil servants, you help veterans, you do this. I don't care who you are. Like, that's who I'm vote. That's who you have my vote as a
yep,
result, because I know what you stand for. And I've actually talked to this individual and shook his hands, and the guy is genuine,
yeah,
genuine.
yeah.
So
Vote
I
for the
will.
person, not the party. That's yeah,
Exactly. So, anyways, hey,
yeah, brother.
so yeah, man, it's been a while since
I
we've
know.
had these types of exchanges, man. So it's good to be back. Um, so everybody, my article, I'll put it in the show notes. Once Jake comes out, I'll also add it to our Instagram page to check it out. Make sure you read it. Go vote. This November, it is November, but especially on election day, it's
This
very, very
Tuesday.
important. This Tuesday, yeah, very important. And really get you. In the end, I think with this podcast, it's about amplifying your voice, and let's really think about how we select our civil servants, how we select police officers, how we select firefighters. Like, this is not about you know shoveling shit and see what happens at the end. Like, no, let's get some qualified people who really are dedicated, resilient, and have the qualities that we all want to see, wearing the badge, dragging a fire hose. Basically, you want to be true. If you were that cop, right, going to that house, how would you want that cop to treat your family?
Yes, exactly.
That's
That's a
like, in
perfect
the
way to
end,
look
that's the
at
way
it.
that's the way you got to look at it. So be vocal. I mean, write to your city officials, whatever concerns you have, whether it's police, fire, no matter whatever concern, just make your voice heard. Just make your voice heard, and let's get some effective changes going.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm excited to see where things go. And yeah, man, glad to be back. Let's not take like 9 weeks in between again. That
Yeah,
that kind of
hopefully. I
sucked.
mean, yeah, I got some more medical testing I need to
Yeah,
do
I got to
to
go be
make
an
sure I
adult
get that
and
squared
actually work
away. And
too.
yeah, no, we'll like I said, we'll keep pumping them out, these episodes out. I know people have been asking, and I've been getting emails and stuff like that. So, bear with us. It's been a little bit trying of 2024. It's been
Yeah,
an interesting year,
yeah, and
but
it's not quite over, so we'll finish strong.
yes, yes, we will. And again, like, we love our supporters, love our sponsors. And Jake, you want to go down the list real
Yeah,
quick of all
super
of them?
super huge thanks to everybody coming out to help us like always. AAA Police Supply, love you guys. 22 Mohawks, everything you guys are doing, including the studio that you're in now, sir.
I
It's
know, right?
very very fancy.
Yeah.
Obviously, huge love for Havoc Journal and everything that Charlie's done for not just you but also me now, which is fantastic because a lot of times I just write stuff and nobody gave a shit. And Charlie's like, "This is actually kind of good. You should do this more." It's
Yep.
like, "Thanks,
Yep.
man."
Yeah,
But no,
exactly.
big thanks to Havoc Journal for having the platform for all of us to be able to participate in these conversations, as well as their foundation, Second Mission Foundation. Check them out at secondmissionfoundation.org. And of course, a big thanks, because I just rocked the concealed belly band last week for work. Kyle Lamb's company, Viking Tactics, dude. We got to talk about that. We got to have a gear episode. That
We
thing, he just brought it out like a month ago, and I grabbed one. I was like, I'll just try it and see how. Yeah, it's freaking rad. So big thanks
Nice.
to Kyle for all his support.
I'll see if I can get him for that episode talking about
That'd be pretty
gear.
awesome. Yeah, talking
I'll
some
see if I
kit.
can get him. Yeah.
I kind of am in like a scratching. Like I want to talk kit like for
Yeah.
an hour or two.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but But no, big thanks to Kyle and everybody, and of course all the listeners, not just my mom and your wife, but everybody else too, for all their support with us, and so thankful to have the opportunity to do this. And we'll try and do better about taking the time between now and the next one.
All right. Well, everybody, hopefully, again, like, share, get these episodes out to your friends, family. We love to see the numbers increase as we move along. And everybody who's working tonight,
Yep, stay
obviously,
safe.
and stay sapient.